Welcome everyone to our open workshop on the 8th of September today, and those in chambers, welcome along for your attendance. It's great to have you here, and also those that are viewing online. Open workshops provide an opportunity for our public to participate in council workshops on subjects that are interest to the whole community. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the Moorweena people as the traditional owners of the land and recognise the Tasmanian people as the original owners and continuing custodians of the lands, waters of this island, Litchfield River. I pay my respects to Aboriginal elders past and present. The Glenorchy City Council is absolutely committed to working in a way that welcomes and respects all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. I'd like to introduce our elected members are here this evening. From my left is Alderman Tim Marks, Alderman Peter Riddler, Alderman Justin Stringer, Councillor Molly Kendall. My name is Russell Jackson, Acting Mayor, Emilio Reali, CEO, Alderman Stephen King, and Alderman Stuart Slade. And we have apologies from Alderman Josh Cockshut and also Alderman Shane Alderton, and our Mayor is away on leave at the moment. So before I introduce our first speaker for tonight, I just have a few updates on some events and some new initiatives that are coming up regarding the Glenorchy City Council. Before I cover the upcoming meetings for the week, I'd like to take this opportunity to really congratulate a local resident, Real Cashian, who received life membership at the Glenorchy Garden Club for over 20 years of service. And Real was inducted at an event that I was at, and I just wanted to pass that on and wish her congratulations publicly. This morning, Alderman Slade, who's with us, attended the launch of the Crime Stoppers Week on behalf of Council, and what we just discussed was an excellent event. This evening, attending a reception at the Government House for the Claremont Spring Flower Show 40th anniversary. I went to the event on the weekend, and me too. There's some very nice. We have very good gardeners in our municipality. Very good. Yep, I might enter next year. What do you reckon? No?
What would you put in, Russell?
Well, I had to learn some understanding about different flowers, but probably, I don't know, camellia or rhododendron, something like that.
Something like that.
From my go.
Of course.
Yeah. Wednesday, the 10th of September, the CEO, Emilio Reali, is going to, and I will be attending the Rotary Club of Claremont as guest speakers, and we'll be providing updates on the Claremont Link Road, security measures around the shopping centres, and plus so much more. Thursday, the 11th of September is a very busy day. Our Rapid Relief team have invited all our elected members and directors to a barbecue lunch at Montrose Bay High School for the Are You OK Day. At 5 p.m. that evening, Alderman Marks and Stringer and Councillor Kendall will attend the Shelter Tasmania 50th anniversary celebration, and Alderman Slade will host the September Lunar Arts exhibition starting at 5:30. On the Sunday, I'm going to be attending the National Battle of Britain Assembly wreath laying ceremony at the Hobart Cenotaph. And next Wednesday, the 17th, we've been all invited to the Dementia Awareness Week at the Lunar Arts Centre from 11 to 1. And then we have a citizenship ceremony at 5 p.m. So
on the Wednesday.
On the Wednesday, yes. Now, an exciting initiative that we have is we have our marketing and communication team have begun a series called Places of Glenorchy, and the team will be releasing a new video each and every week highlighting interesting and picturesque places that are in our city and in our area. The first video was posted last week, which featured the Lost World track up on Kunyanya, Mount Wellington, and tomorrow we'll be looking at the picturesque Collinsvale, which will be beautiful. I reckon there'll be some nice snapshots of the snow, maybe. I'm just looking around. Maybe snow? No? Yes? No one's giving me anything. Perfect. Collins Cap, maybe? Yes. Yep. Beautiful. All right. So if you do have a suggestion, anyone, regarding an area or a place that we should highlight, feel free to contact council. That'll be great. So moving on to our workshop. Firstly, I'd like to welcome Ruby Finley Duff, who is the Strategic Partnership Manager from the Hobart Women's Shelter. Welcome. Ruby is a professional fundraiser and project manager who specialises in supporting not-for-profit organisations to meet their strategic objectives. She has recently joined the Hobart Women's Shelter and is focused on fostering strategic funding partnerships to leverage and secure funds for the creation of long-term homes. The Hobart Women's Shelter is the second oldest operating women's shelter in Australia. They provide emergency accommodation to support women and children affected by family violence and those experiencing homelessness. In addition, they provide medium-term accommodations for families. So I'll hand it over to you, Ruby. Thanks for coming along.
Thank you, Russell, and good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Ruby Finland-Daft, and thank you, Russell, for that lovely introduction. I'm the Strategic Partnerships Manager at Hobart Women's Shelter, and it's a pleasure to come along today. I think Janet, my CEO, and I came and spoke with Council perhaps 2 or so years ago now. I'm not sure where time goes, but there's certainly been some incredible things that our service has done in that time, but also some really significant challenges that we're seeing, which have really grown over the last 2 years, which I'll speak to today. So Hobart Women's Shelter, we're actually Australia's second oldest women's refuge. We were established in 1974 to provide emergency accommodation and support to women and children who are experiencing family violence. But now we're also seeing more and more of a cohort of women and children who are experiencing homelessness. What our core service does is we provide immediate safe accommodation, so a tenancy, and then my colleagues provide a support service whereby they work with families and individuals to essentially help them to meet their unique and specific needs. Typically that's focused on housing, it might be family violence counselling, it could be legal aid. It really just depends on what the unique needs are of that family in order for them to stabilise and then move through crisis, hopefully into long-term permanent housing. So a little bit about our shelter and our service. So our current capacity is supporting 15 crisis units. We also had, up until end of June this year, 10 transitional properties. And we also now have our first 2 long-term homes, which I'll speak to shortly. Over the last financial year, we've seen that we've offered almost 30,000 total bed nights, which is incredibly significant for what our service provides. In the last financial year, you'll see here that we supported 84 women, which is down by about 20 from the previous year, and 53 children. And the reason they sought emergency accommodation from Hobart Women's Shelter was due to experiencing family violence, but also, as you can see, about 3/4 are experiencing significant housing stress. You'll see here too a little bit around what the average stay looks like for in-service. And we actually, as of last month, had our longest resident finally secure their forever home. That family, which was a mum and 2 young boys, they were residing at our shelter for 13 months. So to take you back, say, 8 or so years, when a crisis period was, say, up to 8 weeks, 13 months is incredibly significant. And as I'm sure you can imagine too, that also has really big challenges for us within our service as well. We're turning away more and more women and children, unfortunately. We only have so much capacity, and we're also put in this really difficult position where ultimately we're really needing to triage and support the most at-risk people in society with the highest and most complex needs, which again puts significant strain on service itself. You'll see here that 51% of women and children who stayed in our service over the last financial year, have secured a long-term housing outcome, so a positive housing outcome. I've decided to include a really beautiful photo there that's just got a really lovely message on the back from a mum. This was done by her 10-month-old baby, and she actually moved into the shelter just before giving birth, and now her and her baby have been there for 10, 11 months at the moment, and they just presented that to us last week. So thought it was quite a beautiful visual. I've decided to just include here, granted, I do need to be really clear that this data needs to be taken with a little bit of a grain of salt just around its position by way of accuracy. This has come out of SHIP, which is a specialist housing and homelessness information platform that all homelessness services use here statewide. But I thought it paints a really clear picture of where women who've accessed our service, those who actually resided in Glenorchy prior to moving into shelter looks like. You'll see over the last 5 years that unfortunately the number of women and children that we're supporting is reducing quite significantly. But you'll see there too that on average there's about a fifth of the cohort that we support actually come from the local government area. So I'd also like to speak to you too about our turnaways, and unfortunately this is ultimately becoming one of the greatest challenges for our service, in particular within even staffing and staff wellbeing. My colleagues in the last year took 1,309 calls from women and children seeking emergency accommodation support. So that's actually telling about 4 or 5 women every single day that I'm sorry, we're full. That has really significant impacts within service itself, but also has really significant impacts on the women and children who are seeking support. It's always a very difficult, because my colleague Janet and I always find it really difficult because we're out there in community advocating for the need. We present these incredibly confronting figures around the number of women and children that we're turning away. But we also find that that's incredibly challenging because we still want people to call us. But unfortunately, we are in a position where just last year alone, we turned away almost 1,000 women and children, which is incredibly significant. And that amounts to 8 in 10 women. And unfortunately, we're now seeing an increase in the children we're turning away to be 9 in 10. In the last 5 years, we have been really focusing in on our data collection, noting that we have been seeing a really significant increase in the number of women and children that we're turning away. And we've been very fortunate over the last 5 years to be in a position where we're actually able to look at what the unique number of women and children are. And so we now have 5 years worth of data, which is really incredible. So you'll see here the figure on the screen. In the last 5 years, we've had 5,483 unique women and children seek accommodation just from the Hobart Women's Shelter. So that's just from our service. And you'll see that unfortunately, due to our capacity constraints, we've turned away 4,395, which is incredibly staggering numbers. Women in Tasmania actually turned away 6 times more from specialist homelessness services than any other state here in Australia. We also know that women and children are at risk of being left behind in housing strategy. And I think that's something that's really a really big take home that I'm hoping to get across to the group today, is just the importance of applying that gendered lens when thinking about housing strategy and homelessness within your community. The number one reason why a woman might not leave an unsafe situation, a woman with children might not leave an unsafe situation, is a fear of homelessness. So it's absolutely critical that we do apply that gendered lens and we ultimately create more affordable housing pathways for women and children in our community. So I guess to give a little bit of, that's, I suppose, giving you some real context of ultimately what our greatest strategic challenge as a service is at the moment. But it's also such a joy to get to speak to you about Isabel and Elsie, which are our first 2 long-term homes that we've built for women and children. So a couple of years ago now, I think it was late 2021, our board was starting to look at the data and seeing, goodness, 8 in 10 women and children seeking support is who we're turning away. And the board at that time made a very ambitious and bold but strategic choice to actually get out there and start building long-term housing, ultimately with the aspiration to alleviate that bottleneck that we're seeing in our service. That's when we decided to set a strategic target of building 25 long-term homes. We know that our shelter is not going to solve the whole problem, but we know that we can use our voice, we can use the power of philanthropy, which I'll speak to shortly, to really be creating momentum and ultimately be creating some of those immediate housing pathways for women and their children. So Isabel and Elsie were funded, and I'll just show you a video of the homes now, if it works. Fantastic. So Isabel and Elsie, they're named after the 2, I guess, core financial contributors to the 2 homes, the Isabel Sims Foundation and the Elsie Flood Foundation. And what you can see here is they are really embedding what we call trauma-informed design. So this is a form of design that the shelter is really trying to be pioneering as essentially part of best practice for environments of people who are experiencing significant trauma, which generally is those who are experiencing family violence and homelessness. Isabel and Elsie have gone on to win numerous accolades. We've won a HIA Australia Housing Award. We've been showcased in Sanctuary magazine. We were up for the Architectural Australia Award for Social Impact Housing. And really, it's about creating a new standard for what social and affordable housing could be. Isabel and Elsie were also purely funded through philanthropic giving, which is really incredible. We were able to raise $1.2 million to build these 2 homes. They're on land that the shelter purchased directly in Herdsman's Cove. And what they've been able to do with these homes is really be able to demonstrate the prototype effectiveness of what trauma-informed design can hold, but also really what shelters can do by way of creating those absolutely critical housing pathways for women and children. Janet and I will actually be next week in Sydney presenting Isabel and Elsie at the 5th World Shelters Conference. And, you know, it's really these homes are really putting Tasmania on the map, I suppose, by way of leading in this space around creating housing pathways with that gendered lens for women and children. I also should mention too that since they were unveiled in March 2024, Isabel and Elsie have also been homes for 13 women and children. So we've really been able to help alleviate some of that bottleneck, create a bit more turnover and flow through, with 13 families moving on from our crisis shelter into long-term housing and now into their permanent homes off the Social Affordable Housing Register, which is just fabulous. So what's next for us? Well, we've been very fortunate in the last few years that we've received 2 land donations. One was from Kingborough Council, and we've been gifted a parcel of land on Gormley Drive there, which we're now in the process of finalising a subdivision. Our initial feasibility analysis tells us that will be able to be developed in about 8 to 10 homes. We're just in that process now, determining what that figure looks like for an upcoming development application. And we've also been gifted a parcel of land in the Geeveston area, and we're just revisiting partnerships at the moment with social housing providers to be able to really assess what the opportunity is for those areas of land to be developed into housing. The social affordable housing provider or community housing provider, can be developing the land, managing the tenancy, and ultimately our shelter can then be focusing too on what our core service is, because that's also been a really big learning for us in the last few years, is not only are we seeing an increase in the number of women and children that we're turning away, but ultimately those who are actually using our service have the highest and most complex needs. And we really need to be thinking about how we can expand our core service to be giving people access to the things that they need. So we've got a really big focus on it at the moment around bringing in place-based supports. We've been very fortunate over the last few years to secure philanthropic funding to actually employ a specialist family violence counsellor who works from our shelter 3 days a week. That was ultimately in response to similar themes that we were seeing across community, which is people are able to finally come into our shelter, but then you're on a 26-month-long wait list for family violence counselling. What does that actually look like if you're in a crisis state to then be on an extremely long wait list? We were seeing that also within legal aid and specialist children's services. So we've been really fortunate to bring in place-based family violence counselling within gender equality, place-based legal support through our partnership with Just Healthy Families and Women's Legal Service Tasmania, and most recently expanding our place-based supports to work with the Australian Childhood Foundation. Moving forward, being able to actually sustain the funding for these place-based supports is absolutely critical, because in the next 12 months we'll also be doubling our capacity. So we will be going up to support 30 units, which will support 30 women, but also up to 90 children at full capacity. So it's about to be a really big jump for us as a service. We're in a position where we're just able to really be investing in our fundraising, our capabilities, our growth, to be able to ensure that we've got that long-term sustainable investment opportunity that not only meets the current but also the emerging needs of women and children. So with that, I am very happy to take any questions if the group has them.
I just had, sorry, my name's Marie. The Geeston plot of land, is there much in the way of services in Geeston to support these high needs people?
Yes, certainly. That's a great question. So we initially assessed the Geeston land. That was actually gifted by an individual who purchased the land themselves in order to develop it into housing for women. And through our Buy a Brick campaign, she heard of what we were doing and thought, actually, let me hand that over to Shelter, essentially, because ultimately it will be developed. And so we made an assessment. The University of Melbourne have a certain criteria around what is appropriate for development of social and affordable housing, and we made an assessment of the land against that criteria at the time and just deemed that it wasn't necessarily appropriate for development that we were seeking to do. So we've essentially listed the land for sale, which aligns very much still with the donors' aspirations. The sale could ultimately then, if it is to sell, we will then invest the dollars that we get from the sale of the land into the Kingborough project. But we're also now in conversations with other community housing providers around, is that a project that could align with what they're seeking to be delivering in that area, because they're ultimately, I suppose, the experts, if you will, in community housing. At the end of the day, we're about improving housing pathways for women and children and working with a community housing provider to just ensure that they've got that gender lens on is what we're doing. And we're fortunate because we're independent. We can follow the opportunity, I suppose, and work with the partner around what meets their needs, but also, of course, ours. Yeah.
Any questions from our elected members?
I've got a question.
Thanks,
Hi,
Patty.
Wendy. When the women exit, or we say exit, that leave the shelter, where do they normally go? Is it private rental? Is it in social housing? Do you map where they get access, I suppose?
It's a little bit of a mix, Patty. We, where we can, we do try and map, and I earlier presented that 51% of women and children who've left crisis and transitional entered a long-term home. That really means that, yes, people have exited into private rental, social housing, but sometimes people might be moving in with friends, or the accommodation might not be suitable for them. It is a real mix. Our aspiration is to be getting people into stable housing, and we've again been very fortunate to be able to partner with organisations like Mobilise, which is actually a new NGO from the mainland that's very much focused on giving people access to housing pathways. And so we're their only partner in Tassie at the moment, and essentially they pay 3 months of rent or 2 months rent and bond for families to, again, just give people a bit of that financial resourcing so that they can mobilise through crisis into long-term housing. And that partnership, since it started in October last year, has already supported, I believe it's 11 women and 13 children. So again, we're trying to think creatively and know that we can't do what we're trying to do alone. We can't solve a problem alone. And it's about working with all sorts of different partners with all sorts of different interesting and creative and strategic models to be able to ultimately solve a really big problem.
I've got a question, just in terms of, obviously, well done on the changing in terms of, pivoting slightly in terms of the long-term housing. It's fantastic to see some stability for them. People who really, really desperately need it. In terms of, you mentioned about the short-term accommodation and that sort of, effectively wanting, a large amount of people being turned away. Are there any plans or what are the needs that you need to expand that service? Is it funds? Is it space? Or what's the holdback?
Well, access to affordable housing is ultimately the key challenge, Russell, for the service. And really what that does is that just creates this huge bottleneck where we're turning people away. a really big priority for us as an organisation at the moment is around diversifying our funding to be able to really meet the emerging and evolving needs of women and children. The last few years, we've been really fortunate to be able to secure one-off grants to bring in these place-based supports. And we've also been really fortunate that within these grants, we've been able to actually trial offering services to the women and children we turn away. So for example, our family violence counsellor is actually able to provide brief intervention counselling to those that we're not able to accommodate. We're also able to connect women with legal services, again, if we're unfortunately in a position where we're turning them away. But again, you know, that core priority is thinking about moving away from these one-offs and what does the long-term sustainability of that investment look like, because we're about to double in our capacity as well. We're about to see that significant jump from supporting 25 women to 30 women and 54 children to 90 children. A big focus of ours also is, while we are a specialist women's service, children are actually the primary cohort of those we support. And so once we're in a position that we're able to make sure we can continue that ongoing investment to deliver our place-based services, we're really thinking about ways that we can be making the environment more comfortable for children, but also ultimately connect children with service as well, because we're seeing, again, ACF, I believe, have a sort of 18-month-long wait list too for their service here in the south. And the way we've been able to act as a catalyst to bring ACF into the shelter has been able to, we've been able to do that, through almost like a fee-for-service model, again, because we've been fortunate to receive funding through various grants and things. So just ensuring that long-term investment, that ongoing financial sustainability to be able to meet those emerging and evolving needs, I suppose, is critical, and that comes through funding ultimately.
Councillor Kendall.
Thank you. Thanks so much for your presentation. There's some really sobering figures in there, obviously, but thank you for the good work that you're doing. My question is always, is there anything that council can do to better support your work?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic question. I suppose really I might just think back to a couple of years ago when we last met with council, and it really just is thinking about what are potentially some underutilised land parcels that you might have within council area that could be used for housing, whether that is housing for women and children, or just housing more broadly. Our understanding is in community there are parcels of land that can be developed. There's a number of opportunities to actually improve housing pathways, and I suppose that's a really simple space that perhaps council could look into. But again, also just being familiar with the numbers. I mean, these are the realities of what our service deals with every day. There are other services who work in the same sector who are also dealing with this sheer volume of women and children who are seeking support, and just being aware of, I suppose, the need and the demand within community is incredible.
Any other questions from the community, to the public at all? Yes.
Ruby, Macomb House, which is the shelter provider for the Salvos, do you have any rough idea of what their volumes are of people they're turning away and accommodating? That's not your organisation.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I wouldn't have, I'm sorry, any idea of numbers, but my understanding of speaking with colleagues and other shelters is a very similar narrative to we are just turning women and children away constantly. So yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have.
No, I just didn't know if you all liaised at some point just to.
I can. Oh, well, our presentation. Sadly, it's a very similar story in many services, but every single day, homelessness services in general turn away 34 people.
Last chance. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much, Ruby, for the great presentation. Certainly something on the cold face of it, and wish you all the very best with the 30 homes, and hopefully more when they come.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. I'd like to now introduce our next speakers, which is Paddy Chugg from Shelter Tasman, the CEO there, and Dr. Laura McGraw, the Shelter Tasman Policy Officer to provide some information about homelessness and what it looks like for different demographics in our community. If we can get you to both come up to the table, thank you. So Patty's worked for over 25 years in both the service delivery with low-income housing consumers and people experiencing homelessness, as well as advocating systematically for a range of policy and legislative changes. She sits on a number of state and national advisory boards related to social housing, homelessness and consumer protection, and her experience and strategic knowledge is well recognised. Lauren has 17 years in the social service across New South Wales, Victoria and Tasmania. Lauren has worked on the front line in youth homelessness, women's services and community homes, and more recently in the research and reporting for the sector. Lauren is a research fellow of the Charles Sturt University and has been published widely. Shelter Tas, is the peak body for the housing and homelessness in Lutruwita, Tasmania, and works to ensure that Tasmanians on the low and moderate incomes have access to housing that is affordable, safe, secure and appropriate to their needs. So I look forward to your presentation. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Lauren's done all the work today and done the presentation, so she can be in the driving seat. Please ask us a question or stop us at any moment. Thank you very much, and thank you for the ongoing support of the Northern Council. You are members of Shelter, which is really much appreciated, and for all the fantastic work that Scout does through we coordinate Homelessness Week. So we really appreciate the council being interested in this area. And I notice you've got your own commitment to housing, which we thank you for. So do you want me to just hand over to you, Lauren?
No. Well, first of all, we do want to say thank you for inviting us here today, and thank you for your time. And in the small grey writing up there, you'll see that our vision is very clearly aligned with your statement of commitment on housing. So we do know that housing is a human right. It's not always treated like that in this country. But our mission is to end homelessness, ensure that everyone has safe and affordable housing. We're just going to take a bit of a dive into how we got to the position that we're in. And we'll start with Shelter Tas. So it's our 50th year anniversary this week, actually. So we've been operating in Tasmania since 1975. So Patty, I'm going to hand over to you.
Well, really, there's so many slides here. I think we'll hand these slides around. So it's really just to give you an idea of, a bit like Ruby was saying, the context of it. So our members are the shelters, like Ruby, Hobart Women's Shelter, Youth Shelters, and also what we call community housing providers. And they actually manage more housing than the state government now. So there's about 10,000 tenancies. So that's like Loretto Housing, or it could be Community Housing Limited. But also the sector, it's a big industry, you know, it employs 1,200 people, and thousands of people are going through the system every year. So every year, 7,000 people are helped by the homelessness services alone. And then what we call Housing Connect, the front door, takes over 40,000 inquiries. So we've got a real issue here about, it's not that nothing's being done, it's just that we've got these structural issues of just how unaffordable housing and the repercussions that they have. So this really just goes along, tells you all about some of the different things we do, like we represent community housing, represent homelessness organisations, we look at policy responses. We're a policy group, so we write submissions on behalf of the sector and look at the bigger picture and how that can be, how that sort of can be changed, I suppose, hopefully. So we have fact sheets, we have e-newses, we do submissions. So all of those are on our website. So I think that's just really to give you a brief overview of that. That's the next one.
Okay. It's not clicking.
Oh, we've got Techo troubles.
There we go.
And this is really just, I suppose, because we get so much in our own talk on what crisis homelessness services are. But basically, crisis accommodation is meant to be short term, like Ruby was telling. It's whether you're a young person, women and children escaping domestic violence. There's also official definitions of homelessness, And we know that often the homelessness of people sleeping on the street, but that's really only about 10% of the homeless population. Might be living in cars, might be sleeping on couches, and sleeping on couches isn't safe. And then just to show that we also represent people on just lower incomes as well. And you'll hear the term social housing all the time. And that's, that's public housing. You probably know, used to say housing commission, but there's a new thing called community housing now. About 15 years ago, the state government transferred considerable stock out to the not-for-profit sector to manage, and that's managing more now. And affordable housing, you hear that a lot, but that's got a definition as well. And short stays, the short is Airbnb stays, all of those that are having a significant impact and changing our housing options.
Okay, so in Tasmania, just a couple of facts here. 33% of us own our own homes with no mortgage, so doing quite well. Another 34% have a mortgage, and then the rest are renters, and often they're long-term or lifelong renters. And that includes private rentals and also people, just as Patty said, who are renting through the state, who are renting community housing or public housing. So that's sort of the background of housing here in Tasmania. But we're in a crisis, as you may have heard this term bandied about, the housing crisis. We have our targets and we're very aspirational, but you would know that rental costs have risen significantly, as have household costs, and people's incomes have not risen to the same level. So it's the people on low incomes, like pensioners, people on disability support, and people who are renting in the private market who are feeling this most acutely. And we'll see in a minute how the demand for rental homes has shot up, and it's really greater than supply in Tasmania. What I really want us to understand is that while we can see individuals experiencing homelessness, they're actually wrestling with a broad and complex structural issue that needs to be resolved. And that's part of what we do. Over to you, Penny.
Well, just social housing, we said that's public and community housing, and that's where people apply. And remember that the difference with social housing is the difference from the private rental market is it's only, you can't charge more than 25 or 30% of someone's income, so people can't get into what we call housing stress. Whereas if you live in the private rental market, it's whatever the market decides and doesn't take into account your income. So that's why social housing is really important, because it stops people living in after housing cost poverty, they're stable, and it shows this is what you've got in Glenorchy. You've got 1,241 public housing, or 421 community housing, and the supported accommodation would be crisis accommodation and beds. So overall, it's saying you've got 2,012 in the Glenorchy area. And here's, you've got 662 applicants. And when we say 662 applicants, that's households, not individuals. So it can be it's quite a large number. And that register for social housing is quite often, monitored or restricted in that if you don't keep your application up to date, you're taken off the list. So, it's probably the actual need is greater than that. And you would have seen just in July, we've got 5,247 applicants on the waiting list in Tasmania. And they're currently, this is priority, not just your normal wait, 92 weeks to get in. Now that's, how many years?
Can I just interrupt? Is that your organisation or is that the total?
That's the total. That's people in Tasmania, all across Tasmania, waiting to get into social housing. So you're waiting as a priority 92 weeks.
Despite the previous speaker saying Glenorchy had a very low number on their graph.
Yeah, so this is Tasmania's numbers.
Yeah, this is Tasmania, and Ruby was just talking
that's got
about.
The primary suburb is Glenorchy. That's why it's a little bit confusing. That's why.
What's confusing?
The first bullet point, primary suburb preference is Glenorchy.
Oh yeah, but that's just showing that jumps probably because that's just showing the Glenorchy people applicants. But then the next 2 dot points is just jumping to the whole statewide system, and then the wait times, because we haven't got the wait times from Glenorchy. Is that enough?
Yeah, I thought the wait time was actually longer than 2 years actually.
It is if you're not priority.
If
If you're not priority.
Oh,
Have I said
right,
that right? Priority is people in the highest need,
right.
and then there's another subclass underneath that, which
Gotcha.
is general, which you would be waiting
3 years plus.
7 years plus.
endlessly, probably. So that's priority. So that's like Ruby, you know, people coming out of shelters, people with really high needs, maybe disability, a whole range of different things. They go in priority. General, you're waiting much longer.
Thank you.
But didn't want to put that stat in there.
Didn't want to depress you too
Didn't want
much.
to press too
Sorry.
much.
Didn't want to depress you too much with the general as well.
Suppressing enough.
It is really alarming when you start to break it down, actually. And this is another key aspect of the issue, and that's rental affordability. So right now, in Glenorchy, your average rent is $550 a week. So just this year, that's shot up by, on average, $30. So high rents are driven, as you would know, an inadequate supply. So people can pretty much just name what they want for their home. Plus the lack of social and affordable housing, and also that really quite dramatic increase in short stay. So all of those things have sort of come into a perfect storm to put us in this predicament where we have very few affordable rentals. So you might have seen the SGS economics report, which comes out every year. It's the rental affordability index. So all of Hobart is unaffordable. We've actually improved. We used to be extremely unaffordable, and now we're just unaffordable. But for people on low incomes, there's nowhere in Tasmania that offers affordable rents. And I just do want to emphasise too that it's not just people on pensions or unemployed people who are impacted by this. It's also key workers, it's community service workers, it's nurses, it's teachers, it's people who are in lower paying jobs as well who cannot afford to find good rents either. So there's lots of knock-on social effects when you get into a crisis like this. And might help explain why we can't always access medical services, or the schools are full as well, because we're lacking those people because they've been pushed out. So officially, this is our private rental vacancy rate. It can't actually be below 0, but it is, and we need it to be at 3% or higher for there to be more balance in the market. So this is a sort of crisis that we're facing. No rentals at any price. And just a comparison between the rentals in 2013 that were available across the south and then what's being advertised now. So again,
And this is for affordable for people on low incomes. Yeah.
Market failure, not individual failure, leaves us in this place. And again, another figure here, you can see the actual increase in short stay. So in 2021, 140 short stay in Glenorchy in total, and that's doubled in 4 years. And same in Hobart, that's also doubled as well. And the reason for this is because tourism in Tasmania has really taken off, and we can all see that. It is a wonderful place to visit, and it's amazing that this is happening, but we also need greater regulation of short stay to ensure that we keep hold of that ethos. Housing is a human right.
So that's through the chair. So how long again is short stay roughly?
Sorry?
How long is short stay?
No, the short stay just means Airbnb and stays and stuff
Okay.
like that. So we use the term, we should probably explain that short term is like the official term for Airbnb.
Okay,
Because if you say just Airbnb,
yes,
it becomes like, oh, well, there's stays and there's
Right.
all the other ones. So that's really just showing the impact of Airbnb plus the others over how many properties that's now taking up in the general stock.
so with councils meant to be monitoring that sort of space, it doesn't look like it's improved, does it?
No, it's actually, I mean, it's a success story in one way for short stay and Airbnb, but it's not a great outcome for local rentals because they take, especially those second properties, are taking away out of the normal market. So there's quite a significant change in only 4 years. If you look at, we're quite surprised when we saw that.
Yes,
actually.
we were.
Mm.
Yeah.
So if you put all those things together, what you're left with is people needing to access homelessness services. So there's about 70 homeless services across Tasmania, so that's grown quite significantly as well. And as Patty said earlier, they support 2,200 people a day. And just some of the ones that are in your local area we've got here. Does anyone know of any others that we haven't named up?
I think McCombs.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And so, yeah, again, on any given day, 34 requests are unmet because of the incredibly high need across Tasmania. 1/3 of requests involve family violence, and more women than men seek assistance. There's also quite a lot of young people leaving homes and presenting alone, and First Nations people as well. So it just shows you the people who are already experiencing difficult issues in their own lives are now having to face the homelessness crisis as well. It's profoundly unfair. But we want to say that there are solutions. This is what we want to talk to you about as well. So our aim is for all housing, 10% of all dwellings to be social and affordable housing. Currently, Tasmania tracks at 6% of housing is social and affordable. We need that to increase, and that's part of our advocacy with government to encourage that target. What is it nationally across Australia?
4%.
So yeah, we're doing better than other states, but we've got a long way to go as well.
So just a question, if I may, so you're expecting new homes to be built there or purchasing ones that are already in the market?
Both.
Both?
Oh, no, I think that you mean to reach the 10%.
Yeah,
Yeah, because about 6% now.
yeah.
We need to do more than the 10,000 promised by the state currently by the state government. So we're talking about new supply, so new homes.
So new homes, not houses that are already in the market. No, so you're not taking houses off first home owners or putting the pressure on first home
No,
owners.
they call that spot purchase. You can do that.
Yeah,
But no, we'd probably be, well, we could, but I suppose you use a lot of strategies when you're trying to do something big. So we support if sometimes buying those homes, say like for Ruby's group, you might want to buy 2 houses for women and children escaping domestic violence. You can't wait for them to be built. But you really, to solve the problem, you've got to add into the new supply. And we have a trouble now with new supply could go straight into short stay or Airbnbs as well. So we need to make sure that 10% is social affordable housing. So we're talking new. And it is it's an ambition, but considering to balance what the housing market's like now, and if you think of somewhere like Netherlands has like 80% social housing, or it's just something that we really need to bump up to keep people safely long-term housed, and we can certainly the demand's there.
Do you support large social housing, or do you like it sparse, stretched around?
I think the lessons of history has taught us very much about diversifying stock right throughout the community.
Right.
I think the intentions were quite good when they did Bridgewater. I don't know if anyone was around then. That wasn't meant to probably turn out like it did, but then all the infrastructure got pulled away. And if you look at the history of public housing, what they did probably from the 80s onwards, they started targeting only to those most in need. Really, public housing was a post-war construction effort after the war, and it used to be homeowners, families used to live in there, but they sort of changed the criteria for it.
Okay. Over to you, Patty.
Oh, so we always say, I think we came to Glenorchy, was it 4 years ago?
We did.
Yeah, and that's where we got the track. And since then, and we really want to do some work around this, is changing the conversation, especially for getting diverse social housing throughout the community. We don't want to make the same mistakes and build it all in one spot again. I mean, that's really not a good idea. If you go to Sydney, do you know the Glebe in Sydney? That's where a lot of that's social public housing, and quite a few areas now through the centre of Hobart have become social housing. So we want to work with local government, and whether it'd be great to work with Glenorchy around some sort of tools of public education around getting that diverse housing. Because if you go back to the waiting list, a lot of those people want to live in Glenorchy, and just having that supportive discussion around what are the benefits of social housing. There's been the new affordable housing there in Queen's Walk along the Brooker. You would have noticed those. That's in is that Glenorchy? Or was that Hobart? Oh, no, it's Hobart. But that, like that those density models are good as well. But just for everything, just trying to bring the population along with us would be something we'd really like to work with you about. Understanding that homelessness is the biggest thing you can do to help homeless people is have more housing, and there's often support that we need to do. You might want to look at any monitoring and looking around your Airbnbs and short stays in what you might like to do about that. And of course, planning. Planning's the big one. And as Ruby talked before about any land that's possibly there that you could look at transforming. But it's really that supportive environment of your urban planning, your social, and, maybe be wanting to look for a 10% target of social housing in Glenorchy. Just thought that one up.
Of course, you can also support local homelessness services a little more and really champion them, and commit to outreach services and youth engagement programs in your area and help them expand and get a foothold here. And of course, affirm the 10% target.
But it's great that you've started your commitment, and I think you're working on some other commitments as well, and we'd be really happy to help you with any of those.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there is if you ever get any constituents or people in your community asking, who can I call? There is a thing, and I don't know if you know about this, called Housing Connect, which is like a big intake system. So people ring up then if it's for crisis accommodation, or you can go and get bond and rent assistance, or just to make sure that they're linked in. If they're homeless, even to make sure they're on the list and make sure they're in the system. And this is the number to call.
Just for you, there's a guy who's sleeping in a car near me, and I sort of talk to him and whatever, I'm getting a few inroads into it. But that'd be the number for him
Definitely
to ring, because he's an older person, and to sleep in a car in 2025 and in modern Glenorchy, I just can't get over it. But so I'll get him to ring that number then.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, Stuart. And the other thing, we were talking to the outreach team, the Salvation Army. You might know them that work in Glenorchy. We got a phone call the other day, and someone was sleeping up the back of Norfolk. I know it's not in your jurisdiction. And someone noticed him being in a car.
Yes.
And it was free, the back of Glenorchy and those valleys and stuff. And they were very worried about him, and they told the police. But they did go out and see him, and he hadn't been linked into anything.
You had
No, this chap's not linked into anything either. So, no, thank you for that. The question I have go past the chair, that's something which I've got a great liking for, is working with our culture diverse people. Now,
Yep.
there's a great community out here with a lot of people from different countries. How does that affect all this? Do they want to live more together, or do they find it all right to be in a mixed group? What's your knowledge and background on those sort of subjects?
Well, my resource centre would be better on that, but I suppose people, like all people around us all here, we all live in different households, we have different needs, and so they would have different needs. My only experience, I suppose, is often if a group's come out as a refugee group, the really importance of being in local community and having other support there, and often because of the trauma that they've experienced, that they often want to be in, a big thing is larger homes with more beds. And we did a study last year before the Hobart Women's Shelter around, we interrogated the waiting list ourselves through some paid consultants to find out, and we were really looking at the women and children in particular. Who do you think waits on the waiting list the longest?
Who?
And the public housing waiting at the 5,000.
Children.
Yep, women and children. And the reason why is because they need often larger bedrooms.
Sure.
And when you go to rent privately, imagine trying to rent a 3-4 bedroom home, or actually the amount of stock that can have that. So that was a really important analysis, because that was the first time it came to light. Because if you look at the waiting list, the main people are single people, or like, oh, we just want to build 1-bedroom homes, but you don't, you need to build a diversity of them. So how you cut the data and look at it gives you different pictures. So it's good to have a different angle that's not necessarily a government one as well.
Any other questions from our elected members or from the public? Yes.
Yeah, I'm feeling like an old horse from welcome back Cotter, I'm always asking. I have a question that council members might be able to answer. I've never been able to find out. With social housing, are those properties charged rates, or are they waived rates? Does that help?
They are charge rates.
They are charged rates. So no one's exempt. Community housing, social housing.
Pardon me, there are some exemptions, but whether it's social or affordable housing, that's not covered under the exemptions.
Thanks for that. I've never been able to get a straight answer to that question.
There are some charitable type housing units that fall under the exemption, but if it's just straight out social or affordable housing, no, it's just rated as a normal property.
Yeah. So, for example, church-based ones like Loretto and Mission Australia, they would be exempt or not?
Not for
No, my understanding is none of them exempt. Some of the shelters exempt.
if it's community housing, no.
But if it's a shelter, like a Hobart Women's Shelter or Macomb House, or
I don't think they are exempt. I think it's got to be fall under a charitable exemption type. Unless they've applied and registered as a charitable business, then they may get an exemption, but if it's just straight out.
they'll all be charitable under the tax rules.
Yeah, I think so. But Southern Cross, for example, do you all remember the Southern Cross Homes, the Catholic organisation, aged care? There was a bit of a kerfuffle between them and their local council to get an exemption. They were going to lose their exemption.
They do fall under an exemption.
Yeah, I think there was something like that. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for answering.
No worries. Thanks for your question. Any?
That was a good presentation.
Yeah.
We have Stuart Coleman slide your question reminded Scout, but we have kindness cards.
Oh, that's good. I'll get that to you
Can you
tonight.
give that to us?
Yeah.
You all one each.
Thank you.
If you want, we've got a supply down at customer service. You can grab some from us. As I've got a supply here. Yeah.
Scout, could you just give us the bit of a rundown
Sure can. Thank you. So these are designed for exactly this purpose. They're waterproof, pocket-sized cards with the crisis numbers on the front.
Yeah.
So number one, Salvos is on there, Housing Connect is on there, Legal Aid is on there. And yes, these are available for the public. We do give away quite a lot of them through our customer service, just to people who are out there trying to support someone they see in need.
Yeah, so certainly, come and council if you know, the way to get it done, and it's good. Someone at home. Any other questions? I'll leave it there.
Can I
Yeah,
comment? And I appreciate the seriousness of this. I used to be a trustee at Canadian Bay Cemetery, Southern Regional Cemetery Trust, and we used to let the hobos actually sleep under the hedges there, even though we used to lose the odd hedge to a smoke and that, and I'd go into the men's place in Warwick Street and have a meal and a shower and that during the day. And this is a true story. We had a pre-date grave for a funeral the next day, and someone fell into one. But what was interesting, a trespasser came through afterwards and also fell in. He got the tap on the shoulder. He actually climbed out of a grave that was 183 centimetres. He actually thought the devil was tapping him on the shoulder. That's a true story. Bit sad, but we used to leave them there, and the main reason we let them sleep there was also out of security, because the gates are locked every night. And just added to the security because there's a lot of vandalism at all cemeteries.
It'd be interesting that Waratah now is actually a great, Samini's have the Elizabeth House down to the old Waratah Hotel, you know where that was?
Yep.
And at the back of that is where is the men's shelter, but at the front is long-term housing, so people can stay there. We were talking to someone there just last week. You can stay there as long as you want to, and meals are provided. And it's a really good example of, I suppose, Hobart Council doing a really good medium density. So unfortunately, people are still sleeping rough and that, but there's also some really great services there that are working with them as well.
Unfortunately, some of those ones that are sleeping rough, it's by choice. They don't want to go and seek services. And there's been recent documentaries on current affairs shows and that, where very wealthy people are sleeping rough just by choice.
No, well, probably, I reckon that a lot of people do that, but we've also found that if people are given enough support over a longer period of time, that changes. Because it's even like the conditions, like it's really important when we shelters or put people into housing that they're going to something really nice, because it changes the psychology. And I think with all of that, because trauma and a whole lot of, individuals, a whole range of reasons, but we know there's certain patterns that you put in place that really help people, and they do change. And I've seen it time and time again. Same with the NIMBY thing, how many objections have we seen trying to get women's shelters, youth shelters, whatever in place? Once they're in place, because they're managed communities, people come around and think they're great. Like, what's the one in North Hobart, Trinity Hill, behind Burger King there? Everyone objected to that so much, but one of the key objectors came and thanked after a year how great it is. So it's just that adjustment that you need, and just knowing that there are things we know that work, because we're professionals, we're doing it a long time. We know the housing models work, we know the support, we're not amateurs. And so really it's making sure that those professional approaches and those lessons are learned and spread throughout the community, really.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for your
Thanks,
fantastic presentation, and certainly sobering
but we can
numbers
do things,
and-
we can do things.
Yeah, and I think certainly with having those solutions and working towards, I think everyone's on the same path now. Certainly no silver bullet, sadly, and certainly nothing we can do, wave the magic wand and make it all fixed, but it's awareness and now making solid steps towards that. I know as a council we're certainly aware of those things.
Yeah, well, the council's so important because you're really close to the community. You're the closest form of government to the community, so it's great to have your support. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you to Ruby, Patty and Lauren for presenting today at our open council workshop. That brings our open part to a close. So thank you for everyone who came along and attended. Thank you for your questions, they were fantastic, and to everyone online, thank you for viewing, and wish you all a good evening.